How's it going, you guys? Today we are talking about the 5 tips that you need to know to learn how to fly a helicopter. Actually, in fact, it's to learn how to fly any aircraft pretty much, but today we're specifically talking about helicopters. We're going to go through 5 of them. I think the last one's probably the most important, but let's get going. Number 1 is you need to learn how to relax. All right, take a deep breath, relax. That's not exactly what we're talking about, but when you're flying a helicopter, the thing that you're going to find the very most, I think, when you're starting to learn how to fly is that you're going to get very, very tense, okay? So you get tense on all 3 controls, the collective, the cyclic, and the pedals. And so you want to remind yourself on a regular basis, find a way to remind yourself, your instructor can help you, to relax on the controls. If you look down and you see your knuckles and they're all nice and white, that's probably not a good thing. So you want to make sure you take a moment, relax, take a deep breath, and reposition your hands. There's a couple tips you can use. You know, there's methods. So instead of putting your whole hand around that cyclic and just gripping it like you would a pistol or something like that, you want to just relax that hand and then reposition the fingers. Maybe use 3-4 fingers instead of the whole hand, because if you're using 3 fingers, it's much harder to actually, death grip that thing. Same thing with the collective. You don't need to be gripping it like this. You can just get a few fingers around there and just go light pressure on that. With the pedals, one of the most common things is that people will over push on both pedals. So they'll kind of counteract one foot with the other and they end up pushing harder and harder. And so you can relax those feet. You can actually just push the torque pedal. You can have the anti-torque pedal, so the non-torque pedal. You can actually take it pretty much right off, all the way off, and then just kind of gently set it back on again. And that kind of gives you an idea of how much pressure you need to have on there. So tip number 1 is take a deep breath, relax. All right, number 2, and this one's really, really important specifically for helicopters, is keep your eyes outside. Stay focused outside, because what happens is you start looking outside and then inside, and you start looking around at different gauges, and you're trying to figure out, this gauge does this gauge does that. And in a helicopter, it's not actually going to be very useful for you to be looking at those gauges at all, especially for the very beginning when you're learning how to fly. Keep the eyes outside. What we need to learn is, first of all, attitude. So we need to learn, what the pitch up or pitch down looks like in the helicopter. We call that attitude. It's exactly the same for an airplane. So you want to be able to sense those attitude adjustments, be able to say, okay, my nose is a little bit high now, I need to push a little forward cyclic, or vice versa. You need to be able to adjust, sense your altitude adjustments. So you should be able to sense the helicopter sinking, sense the helicopter climbing. Speed adjustment, same thing. You can feel that helicopter slowing down, you can feel it speeding up. So you want to learn those sensations, because that's going to be so critical for you. In a helicopter, probably 95% of your flying is strictly eyes outside, and then you're just quickly referencing at your instruments. In an airplane, of course, you need to be paying a lot more attention to your airspeed, particularly on approaches and things like that. So, a little bit more critical there. But for a helicopter, you can pretty much get away. You could put a blanket over top of these instruments right here, and you could go fly the helicopter for an hour, and it wouldn't really matter as long as you have a governor to control your throttle. So number 2 is keep your eyes outside. Now, number 3, I would say, is know your controls. Get familiar with your controls. Spend a little bit of time. It's free to go on the computer or look at a book or something like that. Read about your 3 different controls. I did a video that's called How to Fly a Helicopter. I would suggest that you go check that one out if you want to learn all the details of how the controls work, what each one individually does. But spend a little bit of time and get to know the relationship between all of your controls, how one affects the other, but then just simply what they do, right? Getting really comfortable with cyclic. It's fore and aft, it's left and right. That controls your speed, up and down on the nose. Understanding that the pedals, they counteract your torque, they make the nose go left and right. Collective up and down makes the helicopter go up and down, things like that. So understanding those things, I think, is really important. Having a fundamental understanding before you hop in the helicopter and try and go flying, that's going to be a benefit for you as well. Now, number 4, I would say, this is an interesting one. I would say radio work, because when you're learning to fly a helicopter and then all of a sudden your instructor says, okay, now why don't you do the radio work as well? It's hard for your brain to sort of say, okay, I'm going to shift gears and now thinking about the radio. So there's some things that you can actually do to help yourself out with that. And nowadays it's actually really cool. So you can either use a handheld radio, if you have a handheld radio, You can go to an airport nearby you, and you can just turn on the frequency for the tower, and then you can listen to all the radio traffic, which is pretty cool. Or the easier way nowadays is you can just go on your computer and you can actually go and look and listen to the ATC at different airports all around the world. So you could dial in Abbotsford or Vancouver or JFK or whatever, and you can actually listen to that ATC control traffic. And the reason that's important is because if you spend time listening to it, it's almost like a different language, right? So you can start to learn, okay, there's traffic over here, that airplane, he's on left base for runway 19 or whatever the case is. And so you can learn that stuff and you can get to know what's going on. So when you hop in the helicopter, you go out flying, that's going to become a lot more familiar for you. You can practice radio calls and things like that on the ground. This is stuff that you can do before you spend any money whatsoever. And that way, now that you're in the helicopter and you're actually flying, it's going to be much easier to transition. You're going to feel much more comfortable. That's why a lot of the time airplane pilots, they're actually much better at transitioning to helicopters, because things like that, being in the air and working with the radio and so forth, those are actually much easier already for them. And then I would say the last one is very, very important, probably the most important one of all, particularly for helicopters, is the amount of movement that you're doing on the controls. The controls are incredibly sensitive. You want to do such a very, very small amount of movement on each of the controls. Most people will dramatically over-control the helicopter because they're trying to move those controls far, far too much. So I think the last one that is the most important is make sure that you're using sensitive control movements and small control movements. Anything that's over controlling, the helicopter is going to follow right away. We have to understand that you have an immediate correlation, and there's a direct correlation between the inputs of the controls, whether it's the cyclic or collective or whatever, right to the control input, so up to the rotor head or the tail rotor or whatever. And you're going to get immediate reaction from that. In a helicopter, it's an instantaneous reaction. So we want to make sure that we're being aware of that, and we're doing a very, very small, gentle adjustment. All right, you guys, that wraps up the 5 points. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it educational and information is useful for you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. Share this with somebody if you think they would find it interesting. And I guess we're going to talk to you guys on the next one. See ya.